Malin stood on the black oak dais with her palms open and empty, as if showing the hall she held no weapon and no plea paper, only skin and resolve. Below her, the benches were full enough that wool sleeves pressed together. The carved wolf heads at the ends of each bench shone where years of hands had polished them smooth. Iskar had positioned himself at the center rail with the right staff in his fist, iron rings on its shaft clinking every time he shifted his grip. Dante was a step lower, close enough that she could smell steel oil on his coat and damp snow in the hem. "Speak the old line," Iskar said, voice carrying to the rafters. "Let the transfer stand and we seal before midnight." Malin did not look at him. She looked at Dante, at the scar that crossed his jaw where beard could not hide it, at the hollow at the base of his throat where his pulse moved hard enough to see. "I will speak," she said, "but not your wording." A stir moved through the hall like wind through dry reeds. Someone set down a tankard too hard. The sound rang. Iskar lifted the staff, and the iron rings struck. "Widow claim right is clear. Your husband missing 3 years, kept within Valewood by his own order, claimed by nearest blood if the hall assents. You stand, because I called you to stand." Malin turned then, slow enough that he had to meet her eyes. "I stand, because I walked here." At the side table, Nia held the witness quill upright and did not lower her gaze. The ledger lay wrapped in waxed cloth near her elbow. The broken red seal sat beside it like a split berry. Dante remained motionless, but his right hand opened and closed once against his thigh. He had not touched Malin all night. He had not touched her in 3 years. Iskar stepped up onto the dais and pointed the staff tip at Dante's chest. "Kneel and accept by bloodline." Dante did the opposite of command. He sank to one knee before Mylene, not Iskar, and set his sword belt on the floorboards with a quiet thud. The buckle faced her, not the warden. Gasps rolled across the benches. Malin heard her own breath drag in and out. Her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth, then released. She spoke loud enough that the words struck the stone and came back. "Before witnesses, I consent by my own voice. I choose Dante. Not as transfer, not as stock moved barn to barn, as equal keeper of hearthright. I name no owner above me." The hall went very still, then not still at all. Iskar's face darkened. "You cannot discard right language." "I can challenge it," she said. "The custom says spoken consent before witnesses binds over formula. Hall record enforces the spoken line, you know that. You altered the proclamation at Winter Oath to erase that sentence." His jaw shifted. "Careful." Nia stood and called out, clear as a bell struck once. "I heard the altered wording that night. So did half this hall." Dante raised his head from where he knelt. "I will not claim what is not freely offered. Never did. Never will." For one suspended heartbeat, Malin thought Iskar might bring the staff down on the floor and force the old words by noise and fear. Instead, he drew breath to shout. The memory of that breath snapped the scene backward. At the Winter Oath Banquet in year 741, the meat platters had gone cold before the speeches ended. Goose fat had set white along the edges, and orange peel from spiced cider stuck to the grain of the table. Malin had stayed where widows were seated, left side benches, beneath the cracked antler chandelier that always dripped wax onto the same plank. Her mourning braid lay over her shoulder, bound with plain black cord. She had kept it that way each winter since the news from Red Mere failed to bring Rook home. That night, Iskar struck the floor with the right staff and called names as if reading inventory. "By absence term complete," he said. "Rook Valewood missing 3 years at campaign, presumed dead by season reckoning. Widow to remain kept within Valewood holdings by last order. Transfer by widow claim to nearest blood, Dante." The word transfer hit Malin harder than the staff blow. She stood because everyone turned to look at her, and because if she stayed seated, he would still speak over her and call that consent by silence. She remembered the exact slant of lamplight across his mouth when she said, "Read the full law." Iskar did not even glance at the wall tablets where summary lines were carved. "Law is spoken by office." "It is not," she said. "The challenge clause requires my voiced assent before witnesses." He angled his body so the benches could not see his lips tighten. "Clause waived under missing husband order naming you kept." "You're clipping words," she said. "Kept within lands is not kept under a man." Murmurs ran up and down the benches. Men who had been chewing stopped chewing. Women with cups paused halfway to their mouths. Dante was at the captain's table below the dais, coat still dusted with salt from patrol roads. He rose, slow, as if careful not to set off a trap. "Warden, I refuse immediate claiming." No one breathed for a beat. Then the hall exploded. "Refuse?" Someone barked from the far bench. "He insults bloodline. He spares her. He shames her." The noise broke into competing shouts. Iskar banged his staff and ordered quiet, but the quiet came ragged. Malin stood in the middle of it with heat crawling up her neck and into her face, every eye on her like hands. Refusal cut both ways. She knew that in an instant. Dante had blocked the forced ritual, yes, but he had also left her suspended in public. Not wife, not widow, not free of claim. Humiliation wore both masks at once. Nia crossed from the service table with a pitcher in one hand and a cup in the other. Flour dust marked the front of her apron where she had come straight from baking for the banquet. She did not ask permission from Iskar. She stepped beside Malin, pressed the cup into her fingers, and said at normal volume, "Drink before you fall over." The practical tone cut through the spectacle. Malin drank because her throat burned and because Nia's hand was steady against her wrist. Iskar snapped, "This is right business." Nia met him squarely. "Then witness that she can stand while you talk about her like a grain sack." A few people laughed, sharp and shocked. Iskar colored at the laugh more than at the words. Malin lowered the cup. Cold water had spilled down her palm and into her sleeve. "I do not consent tonight," she said, making each syllable flat. "Record that." Iskar answered too fast. "Noted as delay." "Not delay," she said. Refusal to forced wording. Dante did not move from where he stood. He was looking at the floor between them as if measuring an unseen line. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with restraint. "I will abide her speech." The hall heard it. The hall would talk. By the time the benches emptied, wax had burned down to stubs and the smell of cider had gone sour. Malin stepped off the dais on legs that shook. In the side antechamber, she put both hands on a stone pillar and pressed her forehead against the cold surface. Behind her, footsteps stopped at the threshold. She knew those steps without turning. Dante remained near the door, not entering until she lifted her head. Wind hissed under the ill-fitted frame. Outside, sleet ticked against the shutters. Between them hung the aftermath of public noise and private things unsaid. He spoke first. "I did not mean to leave you there." She turned and leaned back against the pillar. "You did." "I meant to stop him." "You stopped him." Then the hall watched me stand alone. His jaw worked once. "If I had accepted on his command, I would have put your hand in his chains. I chose the wound I could carry." Malin swallowed. Her chest rose, stalled, rose again. She had prepared for anger all evening. She had not prepared for that sentence. On the wall behind him, a torch spat resin and smoke, and the smell of pine pitch mixed with wet wool from his coat. Neither of them crossed the boards between. She watched his fingers flex against his thigh, then still. He watched the pulse jump at the base of her throat where her mourning cord lay against skin. No grand declarations arrived. The charged moment sat there like a blade laid flat on a table. Obvious, dangerous, untouched. "I need air," she said, though the corridor was colder than the hall. "I'll walk you to the stair," he answered. She nodded once. The stone stair down from Bloodright Hall had worn hollows at the center of each step from decades of boots. Melted sleet made the edges slick. Malin's heel slid when she reached the second turn. Dante moved on reflex, arm lifting toward her wrist. His hand stopped a thumb's width from contact, fingers curved in empty space. She leaned toward that halted hand before she caught herself and shifted weight to the wall. Their breaths came louder in the stairwell than they should have. "I'm steady," she said. "I know." His hand lowered. He gave her the wall side and took the outer edge where a fall would be longer. They reached the lower landing with their shoulders not touching. Outside the hall, smoke from cook fires drifted low under the winter sky. The yard mud had frozen ridges that crunched under boots. Malin stopped beneath the bare ash tree and looked at him in the dim light from the gate lantern. 3 years, she said. Everyone else decided what that meant. Why didn't you? He did not answer at once. A cartwheel somewhere in the yard squealed and then settled. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost hoarse. "I wanted you from the first morning fire." The words landed clean, with no shield around them. Malin felt her heartbeat in her palms and behind her knees. Her body reacted before thought could arrange itself. A flash of warmth low and sudden, a tightening in her throat. The sharp awareness of him standing close enough that she could catch the scent of salt wool, leather, and skin warmed under cold air. She was angry with him, grateful to him, drawn to him, and tired of pretending those could not occupy the same breath. "You wanted," she said, "and still you stood away." "I stood away because you were his wife," he said, then his widow in all but record. Then a widow under a missing order twisted into a leash. If I reached while any of that held, I became Iskar with better manners. Malin stared at him until the gate lantern smoked. "Do you think I don't know hunger from coercion?" "I think I know how power looks from my side," he said. "I had men, steel, a family name. You had gossip and a title others used at you. So I built rules and kept them. No touch invited. No room alone too long. No promise I couldn't back with law." His mouth tightened at the last word. "Tonight I broke one rule by speaking what I wanted. I won't break the rest unless you ask." The ash branches clicked overhead in wind. Malin stepped closer by inches, enough that the heat from him reached her through wool. She lifted her hand, stopped near his collar, and let it drop without contact. "If I ask," she said, "it changes everything." "Yes." "Not just us." "Yes." "The levy vote is in spring," she said. "Valewood winter grain stands at 18%. Iskar wants to lock the households through me before that count. If I bond with you, half the hall will call it a power grab, and half will call it rescue. Both halves will still count sacks and vote stomach first." Dante gave a humorless huff. "You think I haven't run that math? I've watched him tie right to grain since harvest." "And if Rook walks through the gate tomorrow?" His face flinched at his brother's name, then hardened. "Then I step back. I always would." "But you think he won't?" "I think I don't know," he said. "I know only this. I will not pretend you are furniture to be reassigned while we wait for ghosts." She wrapped her arms around herself against the wind and felt the wet cuff at her wrist from Nia's water, still cold. "I need proof," she said, "not rumors from men who never saw Redmere." "I know," he said. "Until then, we hold." They did hold. Not by ease. By effort. In the days that followed, Malin slept in her own rooms above the old storeroom and woke before sunrise to avoid eyes in corridors. Dante kept to patrol rounds and training yard checks, coming through the hearthroom only when others were present. Iskar spread talk that delay meant disorder, and disorder meant lost grain, and lost grain meant hungry households by thaw. The number, 18%, began appearing in every argument like a knife flashed from different sleeves. Nia's bakery became neutral ground by default because bread had to be bought by everyone, even people who hated each other. Malin took to standing near the back oven where heat made her fingers unclench. Nia kneaded hard enough to punch air from dough and said, "Heard 3 versions before dawn. In one, you begged Iskar. In one, Dante dragged you out by the arm. In one, I poured soup on the right staff." Malin almost smiled. "You didn't." "I considered it." Flour hung in the air like pale smoke. On a shelf above the prep table sat a wooden stamp block carved with the old campaign supply mark, crossed sheaves under a narrow spear. Nia tapped it with her knuckle. Quartermaster used this when they bought hard loaves for the Red Mere March. I marked every sack myself in year 738. Seal wax from that lot had resin grit from Pine Store's East Road. You could feel it with a thumb. Malin looked at the block, and then at Nia. "Why tell me now?" "Because Iskar's leaning hard on missing stories." Nia dusted her hands. "If proof ever turns up, someone has to know genuine from forged before he shouts it down." That afternoon, a courier sleigh arrived with campaign salvage from a thawed way station. Not a named messenger anyone would remember, just a driver in patched furs who wanted payment and warmth. Crates came off the runners and into hall stores. Dented helms, mold-marked blankets, a chest of mixed papers wrapped in waxed cloth. Iskar claimed office custody at once. Malin saw him from the corridor as he slit bindings with a bone knife. She saw him palm one sealed ledger and slide it under his cloak before scribes could inventory the pile. He noticed her in the doorway and gave a smile with no warmth. "Widow chambers are the other way," he said. "What did you take?" "Office material." "You altered wording once already." He stepped close enough that she smelled clove on his breath. "Careful where you cast accusations without proof." That night, she told Dante exactly what she had seen. He sat at the table in the map room, one lamp between them and both hands flat on the boards, as if holding himself in place. "If it's casualty roll from Red Mere." "If," she said. He nodded, swallowing whatever came next. "If it exists, we bring it to open hall. Not private chamber. He cannot bury it with witnesses watching." "Can you force that?" "Not alone." "Nia can," Malin said. "If seal matches quartermaster mark." Dante looked up. "Then we ask her." They went together at dusk, but they did not arrive side by side. She entered through the bakery front. He came from the alley to avoid feeding fresh gossip with one picture. Nia listened while reshaping loaves on the peel. When Malin finished, Nia wiped her palms and reached under the counter for a wrapped bundle. "I took this at dawn when Iskar went to piss and left office shelves unwatched," she said. She set the bundle down. Waxed cloth, tied with cord, the knot flattened by repeated tightening. On top, a round red wax seal bore crossed sheaves under a spear, pressed so deep the edges had ridged like bark. Dante stared at it and did not touch it. "I never saw that in your hands," he said. "You do now," Nia replied. "Because he would burn it before moonrise if it says what I think." Malin's chest went tight. "Can you authenticate?" Nia nodded and turned the seal toward the hearth. "See the resin grit along the left edge? Grainy, not smooth. Quartermaster's batch from year 738 had that flaw. Also, the spear tip in this die leans slightly. Copied dies center the tip because forgers think symmetry looks honest." Dante exhaled through his nose, long and controlled. "Open it." Nia handed him the knife. His hand shook once before steadying. He cut the cord, peeled cloth, cracked wax. Inside lay a campaign ledger with water-warped cover and casualty roll pages bound by thread. At the top of one page, Red Mere Field Report, with date marks from year 738 and column headings in the quartermaster's hand. He read down. Malin watched his eyes move. Stop. Move again. When he reached the line with Rook's name, his shoulders folded inward a fraction, as if struck where armor did not cover. "Confirmed dead at Redmere," he said, voice breaking on dead. "Body unrecovered after flood breach. Effects logged." He passed the page to Malin. The ink had feathered in places, but the line was clear enough. Her fingers left damp crescents on the margin. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Nia said, gentle and blunt at once, "You can grieve him, and still not let him rule from a grave by one bad order." Malin nodded without lifting her gaze. "Kept within Valewood," she whispered. "He wrote it to keep me housed if he didn't come back." Iskar turned it into a yoke. Dante set his palm on the table, not touching her hand but close. "Then we untie it in the same hall where he tied it." They agreed before the loaf-timer sand fully ran. Return to Bloodright Hall at public session, same dais, same benches, same witnesses. Malin would challenge by spoken consent under custom. Dante would kneel by choice, not command. Nia would bring ledger and testify to seal authentication. They needed 2 witness signatures for valid bond under hall rule. Nia offered first. The second would come from the hall scribe by duty if the challenge stood. When they stepped out of the bakery, snow had started again, dry and fine. Dante walked her as far as the arch and stopped. "Last chance to walk away," he said. "From you or from Hall?" "Either." She lifted the ledger bundle inside her cloak. "Not tonight." Word outran them. By the time Malian entered, every bench held bodies and every aisle held standing room. Iskar stood ready at the center rail in full office mantle, staff polished, expression composed into righteous concern. Dante took his place below the dais with sword belted but hands visible and open. Nia sat at the witness table with ink cup, quills, and the sealed ledger laid in plain view. Iskar began before anyone else could claim heir. "Session called on unresolved widow transfer and grain security attached. We proceed by established right." "Challenge," Malin said. Her voice cut through his cadence. Heads turned. He gave her a warning look that had cowed others before. It did not move her now. "Grounds?" he asked. "Altered wording at Winter Oath. Coercive application of missing order. Denial of consent clause." Murmurs rose. Iskar lifted the staff. "You accuse office." "I accuse you," she said. Dante stepped forward half a pace, then held when Malin flicked 2 fingers at her side. "Wait." He obeyed, jaw tight. Iskar shifted strategy, widening his arms to include the hall. "Households need certainty. Valewood grain levy sits at 18%. We cannot drift under indecision while spring stores are argued." From a bench someone called, "Then follow law clean." Another voice answered, "Let her speak." Nia stood and raised the ledger. "Before he buries this under procedure, casualty roll from Redmere, year 738, quartermaster seal authenticated." Iskar snapped, "Unvetted document seized without office sanction." Nia met him with flower-white calm. "I baked for campaign quartermaster that season. I handled supply marks daily. The seal's resin grit and dye lean match original lot. You know it, or you would have shown this yourself?" A ripple of approval swept the benches. Iskar reached as if to take the ledger. Dante moved between in one smooth step, not touching Iskar but blocking his path with body alone. "No grabbing witness evidence," Dante said. "Captain presumes authority," Iskar hissed. "Not captain by title," Dante answered. "By deed enough to keep hands off her and off that ledger." The hall heard the line and held it. Malin climbed the dais steps without waiting to be invited. Boards creaked under her boots. At the top, she turned to face the room and let her gaze travel bench by bench, refusing to rush. 3 years, she said. For 3 years I was pointed at, spoken over, and kept in status so everyone else could bargain around me. Rook's last order said I should be kept within Valewood. I accepted that as shelter in uncertainty. I do not accept it as chains now that his death is confirmed. She took the ledger from Nia and held it chest high so even back benches could see the broken seal. I honor him. I release him. Lisa. I will not be transferred like stock. Silence took the hall fully this time, not from fear, but from attention. Under custom, she continued, spoken consent before witnesses binds over formulaic right language. I give consent now, in full voice. I choose Dante. Iskar barked. Improper form. Malin did not glance at him. I choose him as equal. He does not receive me from your hand. We enter bond by mutual assent. Dante removed his sword belt and laid it at the dais foot. Then he knelt, head bowed for a breath before lifting his face to hers. I accept what is freely offered, he said. Nothing else. Nia dipped quill and signed the witness line with firm strokes. She held out the quill toward the hall scribe, whose duty hand had already begun to shake with decision. After a long breath, the scribe stepped forward and signed second witness. Ink spread on rough paper fibers, dark and undeniable. Iskar slammed his staff once. I contest validity. The scribe, eyes on the text, said, challenge clause satisfied by spoken consent before witnesses. 2 signatures present. Entry stands. Iskar's mouth opened, closed. He scanned the benches for support and found little. Gossip had done its turn. What began as spectacle now settled as public reversal. People who had watched Malin be diminished watched her claim voice and legal ground in the same place. The shift was visible, almost physical, like a heavy beam lifted by many hands at once. Warden, someone called from the back. You clipped words to force this. Another voice. Strip him of right voice. Calls layered, spread, hardened. Iskar tried to answer over them, but the hall drowned him out. He lowered the staff at last, knuckles white. By session close, he was ordered from ritual seat pending review and told to leave the dais. Disgrace did not come with dramatic collapse. It came with practical removal. The staff was taken from his hand and laid aside. He stepped down to the floor and did not look back. When the crowd finally thinned, wax stubs guttered low and the windows had gone black with evening. Malin remained on the dais until her knees started to tremble. Only then did she descend. Dante waited at the bottom step as if anchored there. It's done, he said. It's begun, she answered, breath unsteady. They stood close enough for shared warmth now, no hall rule left to hide behind. Still he asked, because this was the line he had held for 3 years and would not cross by assumption. Do you want me with you tonight? Yes, she said. Not loud, not uncertain. He offered his hand. She placed hers in it. His grip was warm and careful, calloused palm against chilled fingers. The first contact felt almost startling in its ordinary reality. No thunder, no proclamation, skin, pressure, choice. They walked from Bloodright Hall together through the side corridor where torchlight painted bands across stone. At the threshold of her rooms he stopped again, thumb resting over the pulse at her wrist. If we cross this door, he said, it ratifies more than desire. I know. Political bond. Hearthright shared. No unwinding by morning nerves. She searched his face, reading the old restraint still present, now offered as care rather than distance. I am not asking for morning nerves, she said. I'm asking for you. He closed his eyes briefly as if bracing, then opened them and nodded. Then no more waiting. Inside, her room smelled of banked coals and dried lavender hung near the shutter. She set the morning cord on the table beside the empty candle tray and untied her braid. Dante removed gloves slowly, each finger freed with deliberate attention, then set them beside his belt. He stood still until she stepped in and laid her palm on his chest, over the steady hammer of his heart. The kiss was careful first, almost reverent, then deepened when she pulled him closer by the collar. Salt from his skin, smoke from her hair, wool rasp against cheek, breath shared and uneven. He touched her like someone learning a language he had known in silence for years and was finally allowed to speak aloud. When he lifted her into his arms, she laughed once into his shoulder, the sound-breaking tension that had lived too long in both bodies. He set her down at the bedside rather than dropping with urgency. Every pause was question. Every answer came from her mouth, her hands, the way she drew him back when he gave space. Outside, wind worried the shutters. Inside, their old discipline did not vanish, it transformed into attentiveness. He traced the line where morning cord had rested at her neck, and she caught his wrist, guiding his hand where she wanted it. Names were spoken softly and then not needed. By the time Coles settled to redden quiet, no part of the choice felt procedural. Near dawn, Malin woke to pale light at the shutter seam and the weight of Dante's arm across her waist. For a breath, panic flashed from old habit. If someone saw, if the hall spoke, then memory replaced it. She had spoken first. In the hall, before witnesses. She turned within his hold and touched the scar on his jaw with one fingertip. He opened his eyes immediately. Soldier sleep. You all right? Yes. He searched her face and seemed to find what he needed. I meant what I said. Equal. She nodded. Then prove it with breakfast duty. His laugh came rough from sleep. Cruel commander. By deed, not title, she said, and he grinned despite himself. They did go to Nia's first, because promises make best sense when carried into ordinary rooms. Nia looked up from scoring loaves, took one glance at their joined hands, and snorted. About time your faces matched what everyone else could see from the lane, she said. Malin blushed and reached for bowls. We came to thank you. Thank me by eating before you faint. Political revolutions burn calories. Dante accepted a ladle and did as told. Nia watched him serve Malin first, then himself, and nodded once as if a private checklist had been satisfied. You both know gossip will keep barking, she said, wiping the bench with a damp cloth. It can bark, Malin replied. The hall heard me. Nia tapped the table where yesterday's witness ink still stained her fingertip. Then build from that. Co-rule hearthright like you said. Make grain decisions where people can see them. 18% doesn't care about romance. Only storage and fair count. Dante inclined his head. We start with open stores this afternoon. Good. Nia slid a heel of crust toward Maylene. And hang that old mourning cord somewhere you choose, not where someone else tells you. Later, at the Valewood hearth chamber, Malin placed the black cord over a carved peg beside the mantel, not hidden, not worn. Under it she set Rook's old eating knife, the handle worn smooth where his thumb had rested. She touched both objects and spoke his name once, not as chain, but as farewell. Dante stood with her, silent, hand at the small of her back. No one interrupted. No right staff knocked. The house creaked in winter wind and then settled. By evening, they sat at the long table with store tallies spread and household stewards waiting in the doorway. Malin called for transparent counts by bin and district. Dante backed each directive with patrol logistics and wagon routes. Decisions moved faster when no one had to guess which voice truly held authority. Some stewards looked startled, some relieved, all attentive. Outside, snow began again, thin as sifted flour. Nia arrived near nightfall with a tray of still-warm rolls and left it without ceremony. She paused only long enough to squeeze Malin's shoulder and mutter, "Keep your spine where it is." When the room emptied and coals burned low, Dante leaned against the table edge and watched Malin scratch notes in the margin of a grain map. "Tired?" he asked. "Down to bone," she said. "Also hungry again." He pushed the tray toward her. "Then we are governing correctly." She tore a roll, steam fogging the cool air between them, and held out the larger half. He took it. Their fingers brushed and stayed together a beat longer than needed. Beyond the shutter, Bloodright Hall stood dark against the winter yard, its stone walls no longer echoing with her silence.